Hello everyone and welcome. My name's Robyn Ewing and with Michael Anderson I co-direct the Create Centre at the University of Sydney. Create stands for Creativity in Research, Engaging the Arts, Transforming Education, Health and Wellbeing. Tonight we're looking forward to sharing some of the research that's been happening in the Create Centre. And if you'd like to learn more about Create, please go to our website. We'd love you to become a friend and be around for lots of the activities that we do. One exciting thing coming up next week is the Creativity Workshop, Create Centre Creativity Workshop series, which you might like to have a look at. Anna might put a link in our chat. Before we go any further tonight, though, we'd like to acknowledge our First Nations Australians. We'd like to acknowledge that this land was never ceded, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And we'd also like to acknowledge that story and the arts are at the centre of First Nations doing, being, knowing and becoming, and how much we have to learn from our First Nations Australians. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Dr. Kathy Rushton, who's a member of the Create team, and Eliza Oliver, who is Create's research manager and is also a psychologist and involved in lots of other things as well. And we're going to present some research that we've been doing in southwestern Sydney. There's a little bit of activity for you to get involved in. If you'd like to put your acknowledgement of the country that you're joining from tonight in the chat, that would be wonderful. If you'd like to put any questions or thoughts that you have in the chat, that would be good as well. And it's now my privilege and pleasure to hand over to Eliza, who's going to lead us tonight. Thanks, Eliza.
Thanks, Robyn. Good evening, everyone. Very happy to share some of our research that we've been doing at Create today. Today, I'm going to be talking about a program that we ran in southwestern Sydney schools, which we called Arts Rich EAL. And I'm going to be presenting this alongside Robyn and Kathy, who are the brains behind the work and the magic behind it. I've just put it together in slide format. So I guess I'll start by kind of explaining what the problem was that we were trying to tackle. So essentially in Sydney or in southwest Sydney, a quarter of students in New South Wales are learning English as an additional language or dialect. And that's what EALD stands for in this context. And in southwestern Sydney, that number of learners in schools ranges from about 55% in primary to 38% in secondary schools. So, and students in these areas, research has demonstrated they have lower literacy levels, lower graduation rates from year 12, and are less likely to attend a tertiary education institution when compared to the Greater Sydney area. So we aim to kind of tackle this issue through the implementation of Arts Rich EALD, which is a co-mentoring arts pedagogical intervention, which we did across 4 schools with EALD learners. And I will talk a little bit about what that looked like and what the results of the study were. But before I do that, I'm going to invite Dr. Kathy Rushton to run through a little exercise with everyone to get us thinking about how language is connected to our own stories. So I'll hand over to Kathy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to present this work. It's the work of Dr. Jacqueline DeWart from the University of Western Sydney on language mapping. It's been developed and presented over many years in different publications, but one I'm holding up in my hand is Tell Me Your Story. It's a Primary English Teaching Association book that Robyn and I used with the participants in this research. They were offered the opportunity to read some of the strategies in there, and this was one of them. It was a way to start. It's called language mapping, and it's where you map your own use of language visually. So this one you see on the screen is just one of many different ways of mapping language. But this is a quote from a student, a primary student. I want people to know my language because they will know me better. My language is in my head and my heart, which encompasses all those levels of language ability, not fluency and literacy, maybe just some smattering of words or a receptive understanding. It covers everything. And we've got them to map how they use language and who they map them with. There's one from me. See if you can work it out. Anyone who says, I understand what that says, can you put it in chat? It looks nothing like the other language map. And I said use emojis. You could do this yourself, but I cheated. I used a few little icons and slides on a PowerPoint. Speaking Australia, learning French. Exactly right. So I could have put some other images there because I've learnt French, Italian, Spanish, Indonesian, but I only speak Australian. So you could see how I could represent that in many other ways. I'd like you to have a go tonight. If you could do one where you are in your own space, a map using a Venn diagram, a tree, what I did, a straight line with a statement, anything that you think visually represents your use of language and that helps you share all your linguistic resources. So I'm just giving you a little glimpse into my life. My father spoke Hindi, Fijian, and I found out later understood Welsh, and he was an English speaker. How would you represent my relationship to my family that way? Who would I speak these languages to, or who would I hear them from and understand but not be able to speak? So there are many ways to represent the cultural and linguistic resources that we all have. So here are some prompts. At the end tonight, if you can do one of your own, we'll give you an opportunity to share them. Otherwise, put it in chat now if you can do a string of emojis to show your cultural and linguistic learnings. But think about yourself. Who do you communicate with? And how, in what ways do you communicate? In what language or languages and or dialects? And when and in what places do you do this? So I'm thinking in some families, one grandmother speaks Hokkien, another grandmother speaks Sicilian, and the family speaks English, but somehow they all get to understand each other. And it's making a picture, your own way, telling your own story. And I put a little reference there to that book. If you wanted to look this up and try it with your class, it's already published with those many maps. And we did this in this research. We had an opportunity for the teachers to try this and then suggested that they try it with the students in their class.
I'm having a go at doing mine. It's quite difficult to, I'm just using the emojis. It's quite difficult to encompass all of your linguistic connections in a little straight line.
You forget how much you know. How much you know and how much it means to you. So I can't draw this for you right now, but I know that my first word was cat. And I also know that my father's first word was cat. My grandmother told me, but he said it in Hindi.
All right.
Which is a funny connection to have. But I think that's something that means something to me, and I would put it in my language map. So it doesn't mean I speak Hindi or understand it, but it's got a cultural meaning in my family because of what it meant to my family members. So linguistic mapping is all about your identity and your culture. And many Australians my age say they can't speak the language of their parents because what they mean is, I'm not fluent. I didn't learn it officially, but they actually can speak it. Oh, and Eliza's done one with emojis.
Yeah.
I have to have a look, Eliza.
I thought I would. I'd set the tone, allow myself to be the sacrificial lamb, and give it a go.
I speak Australian, French, and I don't know what that flag is, red and white. Scottish? Norwegian. But she loves somebody who speaks Italian.
Pretty good.
Very good. Well done.
That is a beautiful language map. But if you went further, there'd be other people in that map, wouldn't there, with other languages?
Yes, I was thinking like I started with myself, but actually there's a version where I start way before me, you know.
Exactly right. Can you see he's written, I speak Vietnamese and English and some French, and on his tree he's put when he speaks these different languages. The writing's too small to see, but he's got who the relatives are that he's speaking English to in the Australian flag, and then different people he's speaking Vietnamese or Italian to. And that has got to be a family, hasn't it, that's brought those different languages in. So that child chose that. And just a tip, if you're going to try this, don't show everyone one map and say, do the map. Talk about it first, because the creativity comes out then. They don't feel they have to do it one way.
So the reason we invite that, I guess, as a prompt, as a kind of creative activity, is to think about how language can impact us in our way that we communicate with everyone. And it's also a good kind of hook into what this project did. So the teaching artist that we employed in this program ran this activity with the teachers that were part of the schools. And I'll get to that in a bit, in a second. And I'll just come back to kind of the theory behind why we did this the way we did it. So research has long identified that engaged and embodied learning improves learner outcomes. And students who are engaged with their learning perform better on standardized testing. They've been shown to have improved imagination, confidence, and they have fewer behavioral issues. So programs that are then designed to engage students and promote embodied learning have also demonstrated increases in literacy and English language acquisition. And that's also been demonstrated with people with low literacy rates and in EALD learners. So research into arts-rich pedagogies in particular has consistently demonstrated the positive impacts of that embodied learning on learner engagement and literacy development. In particular, research has shown that creative and arts-rich pedagogies with a focus on drama have shown quite impressive outcomes, and that comes from the queen of that sits among us today, Robyn Ewing. All of her body of work has shown that. So translanguaging, I'm going to say what translanguaging is, Kathy, but I'm going to let you jump in and correct me. So it's the practice of encouraging multilingual students to use all of their language skills rather than just the prescribed language of the classroom. So in our case, that would be English. And the research has shown that it's beneficial cognitively, academically, and linguistically. And then there's also kind of other benefits around cultural inclusivity, a sense of identity, engagement, comprehension, and expression. Kathy, have I summed it up?
You've summed it up just beautifully. And I'll add a punchline on that. And these benefits are not just for the bilingual students, they're for the monos like me. They benefit all the students in the class, which is the wonderful part about this change, if we can make it.
So this program then aimed to include translanguaging practices and arts-rich pedagogies with a focus on drama in EALD classrooms in Western Sydney. So I'm going to flick back now to Kathy, who's going to talk about translanguaging space.
Yes, I'm using the word space because this is what the issue is. You can't learn another language as an adult without using the one you've already got. And most teachers are quite aware of that. You call on your linguistic resources to make sense of the language that you're learning. The older you are, the more you do it. Very little students, very baby ones, will often, if they're bilingual, answer you in the language you use to ask them a question or speak to them in, because they're not differentiating, they're just communicating. So when we think about that, the natural state of affairs, and then you think about school, where we say to students, don't speak your language, we're learning English here, it's ridiculous. So what we want to do is create a space where all the participants feel comfortable to use all their resources. That makes sense, doesn't it? It just makes sense. Here's the problem, though. We have an education system, and when I say we, not just in Australia, where standardised testing and the standardisation of resources and pedagogy and a whole lot of other things push teachers into thinking, we have to work on this, we have to get this done, and not thinking we can make a space where we get those things done, but it can be one where the dominant language isn't the only language, for all the reasons you've just told us about the benefits for inclusion, for language development, and creativity. I'm going to add that one. Why space? Because you can only control what you can control. So the space might be your classroom. Ideally, the space would be your school, but you can work from there to there. But just allowing students to use their language resources in one lesson once a week, that's not going to develop translanguaging. You need to think about how you can do it on a whole lot of levels, which is a challenge. But we look at the next slide with some suggestions of how you can create that. So the research that I've conducted previously and what we're doing now with the Create Centre is about getting classrooms to try and develop a translanguaging space. And in this research, it's been mainly around drama with the teaching artists. But previously, we used readers' theatre, poetry and drama, because it's a great way to start, and invited teachers to start thinking about how you could start to develop the translanguaging space. One of the things, and Robyn will discuss this later, is choosing resources that present another linguistic or cultural perspective. So really easy start are the many wonderful resources we now have written by First Nations Australians, sometimes directly using their language, and if not using all of it, using some of it. The one that leaps to mind straight away is Shorty Creek, where it's got two versions in the picture book, in a dialect, Creole, and in English, and the students wrote the picture book. So this is a really good way to show students, whatever language they've got, oh, we can use what we know. So I think that we have to be very vigilant about making sure we're offering many opportunities for the student to use their first language or dialect in a variety of situations. So that can be from pair share with a similar language background person to collaborative planning and writing, reading with a group speaking many different languages. And it can be in different subject areas, but a beautiful, easy way to start is with English and drama.
With all of that kind of background in mind, we aim to then develop this program, this intervention, to be delivered to Southwestern Sydney schools. So it was a language inclusive, arts rich intervention for EALD schools. And we base the program on the success of other models that we've used before. So because many interventions that are often sort of rolled out in schools where they use teaching artists, those teaching artists can become, they go into the school for only a particular part of the program, and students then tend to report these short-term benefits, but often those benefits fail to be integrated into the classroom teacher's pedagogy, and it can feel quite disconnected from the student's curricula. So Robyn Ewing knew all of this when she developed the school drama model in co-design with the Sydney Theatre Company, which is a 7-week professional learning and co-mentorship program that involved a in-classroom teaching artist working alongside the classroom teacher, and that worked to facilitate literacy development using drama-rich strategies alongside authentic literature texts. So, and quality literature, I should say. So school drama, the model of school drama then had demonstrated improved literacy and better learning outcomes for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. And that this is posited to have worked by encouraging increasing engagement, embodiment, and oracy. So it was that model that we used to platform the Arts Rich EALD program, but we integrated more of a multi-art strategy. It was still predominantly a drama-based program, but it did include some visual arts elements. And we hoped that that would improve learner engagement, literacy, and embodied learning. So, and the visual arts element also added another non-language-based or non-English-based dimension to the program, to encourage learners to experience and express themselves through translanguaging and different creative mediums. So the Arts Rich EALD program took place over 4 schools in Southwest Sydney last year, and was facilitated by 3 different teaching artists. The teaching artists met for a development day alongside the teachers, the classroom teachers, and they planned the program, and then the teachers and the teaching artists team taught. So they worked together in terms 3 and 4 last year. And I should mention too that was across 2 primary schools and 2 high schools. The programs did vary based on the needs of the school, the classroom, and the curricula. So it wasn't a manualised program, but they all included a variety of workshops and activities that spanned multiple terms and focused on different aspects of language acquisition and artistic expression. So they predominantly looked like drama-based workshops that incorporated sort of storytelling, puppetry, engaging students in activities that are aimed to build confidence, imagination, and empathy, and foster that sense of understanding narrative and character. So, for example, that could look like students participating in a name circle, freeze frames, games, other games that you might be familiar with as drama educators, and using text alongside that. So 2 texts that we'll probably discuss a little bit later and how they worked alongside the program was Azaria, A True Story, and The Duck and the Darklings. Sorry.
Darklings.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So in addition to these activities, the students often also included interactive collaborative tasks, kind of like creating 3D sculptures or performing their readers' theatre scripts, or doing improvisational dialogue. And their activities were designed to develop students' nonverbal communication, creative thinking, and teamwork skills. They would often explore things like mood or energy and emotion and landscape through both drama and visual arts, pardon me. The programs in the secondary schools didn't look at those texts that I mentioned earlier, but integrated Shakespearean studies and visual arts pedagogy. So, for example, students at one school looked at A Midsummer Night's Dream using artifacts and costume elements to embody the characters and look at theme exploration of the play. And they would do that through using drama warm-ups status-based games, critical thinking games, and fostering a sense of understanding of classical literature, which was what the teachers wanted to work on, and then aiming to enhance those collaborative and analytic skills. So we collected data on the program. Each teaching artist took part in semi-structured interviews with the researchers online via Zoom, and that was conducted in the final week of the program. And we used using semi-structured interviews to kind of have a more open-ended, prompted reflection and learning about the program, and looking at strengths, challenges, learning gains, and ways to improve. We took an inductive approach to analysing the text, which just meant that we allowed the text or the interviews to speak for themselves. We didn't go in with key themes that we were going to try and draw out, or predictions around that. And that gave a better sense to the individual and unique experiences of each of the teaching artists, whilst allowing us to kind of delve into the broad themes that emerged. We also did semi-structured interviews with teachers. I'm just talking today about the impact that this had on the teaching artists, but we did do that alongside teacher interviews as well, following the same sort of process. 3 key themes emerged from the interviews with the teaching artists, and that was an improvement in engagement and embodied learning. They talked broadly about successful strategies and then challenges that emerged. So I'm just going to drill down on each one of those a little bit more. So engagement was the most clear and sustained outcome by the teaching artists that they observed across all 4 schools. So there was high levels of reported student engagement, increased willingness to participate, and a greater willingness to take risks in the classroom. This was evidenced by sustained engagement, excitement and laughter, and just requests for the teaching artists to come back every week. I have a couple of quotes that I thought I would share that best demonstrate this. So engagement was high, very high. You could see their enjoyment. Even the ones who were shy to perform in front of the class, you could see their excitement and the laughter in the room. And despite being a little unfocused, they really did want to engage in the different activities they were doing. And another teaching artist said, "I think I just noticed such a vast difference in the students' engagement and involvement from the very first workshop I did with them to the last. Just into a couple of workshops later, every week, I saw that they were more willing to take risks, to put up their hands and respond, and to say, I want to share this improvised conversation with you, even when it wasn't polished or perfect. They were proud of what they were doing, and they wanted to read it aloud in the class for everyone to hear." So the second theme that emerged was embodied learning. So as the program progressed, students had to kind of grapple with more difficult concepts, literature concepts, or concepts they were exploring in the classroom, and marry those with the texts that were being studied. And this allowed their engagement to that challenge allowed their engagement to become really prevalent. So I've got a quote here, which was, "The more switched on ones were really trying to incorporate some of that new language and repeat some of that new language. And I think the combination of seeing the words, miming the words, speaking the words, playing with the words in context was so powerful. Even by the end of my weeks with them, there were just some of them you could see that thrived. They got it straight away. You could see most of them really enjoying and engaging with things, even in small little groups." So just to reflect a bit on now, that was obviously focused on what the students gained, but the program is also aimed for teaching artists development as well. There is a professional learning for them as well. And that they reported several outcomes that were co-teaching and professional development, so having that experience, collaborative unit planning and delivery, flexible student-centered approaches, flexible teacher skill development, adapting to diverse needs, and building relationships and trust. So in particular, the benefits of co-teaching were really highlighted. And co-teaching was designed so teachers could continue their professional development throughout the program and continue to embed that practice within their pedagogy even after the program ended. And that we have seen has been integral to the success of other programs similar to this. The teaching artist stated that the team teaching was really beneficial for them, both for the teacher and their own learning. When the teaching staff were very engaged, this also enhanced the work of the teaching artist. So there was that kind of dual relationship or sort of symbiotic relationship. And I just have a little quote here from one of the teaching artists, which is, "I really grew through this process by working with these teachers, understanding how to structure a unit of work in a really collaborative way, but also just a really holistic way that really did support the learners and was flexible enough to change and move with the direction of where we wanted each week." So there were some challenges as well that the teaching artist noticed, though these focused around logistical issues, which I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone who's worked in a school, that was really difficult to find that sweet spot around scheduling and time constraints and integrating the program effectively into the curriculum that already exists. That seemed to be much more of an issue in the high school formats than the primary school formats. That's partially because of how high schools are timetabled and the demands on curriculum there. Managing student behaviour was difficult for the teaching artists. Ensuring teacher engagement was this had kind of mixed reviews. Some teachers were really engaged. Some teachers had reported more kind of burnout and felt that the program was potentially adding to their workload rather than allowing that kind of co-teaching model to sort of support them. But the way they overcame these challenges was through building relationships and trust, investing the time and being authentic, using adaptive strategies, and really being flexible across the whole program. So what does this mean for kind of where we go to the future? So we take this as like more evidence of the importance of engagement-focused interventions. We'd like to look at the mediating effects on learner outcomes. So what is it that really happens in that magic space between using these strategies and the outcomes? Like, is there something missing in between? Is it confidence that's leading to that? Or is it increased practice? Or is it social engagement? Looking at really nutting that out as a research question is really fascinating to us. We have some basic recommendations from learnings that around program duration and structure that we've come up with in looking at longer durations for more sustained impact and starting at the beginning of secondary education. I'm going to invite Robyn now to lead a conversation around the program and Q&A and delve a bit more into some of the literature-based questions. Thanks, Robyn.
Thanks, Eliza. There's some great language maps emerging, which is exciting. But before we look at those, Kathy, one of the things that emerged was having sort of talked about the importance of translanguaging. One of the things that we learned, I think, from the experience was that it was not always easy for that to happen in the classroom. And I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, you know.
I think it's the idea is contradicted by the focus in schools.
Yeah.
So the NAPLAN would be one example.
Yes.
That goes from kindergarten up, or the phonics test or whatever. It's all in English.
Yes.
Many teachers don't recognise their own linguistic capability. And without criticising the university in which I worked, because we all tried, but universities themselves, when they're inducting pre-service teachers, we don't ask about their linguistic abilities. It's not part of the request we have of your ability to become a teacher that you have experience with music or with languages, unless you want to teach languages. So I think in a classroom, to be focused on giving students the education that everyone wants for them, and that's reliant on being capable in the English language, it's very difficult for a lot of teachers to think how they can do this. That's why I was recommending those 3 strategies before. Readers' theatre, beautiful, easy one. Drama and poetry. And I personally chose those because I thought this is a way to allow students to use their first language and develop knowledge about English at the same time. So if you're going to write a reader's theatre, you can have dialogue in any language. And the heavy lifting the narrator has to do in English for the audience. So there's ways in if you sit down and think about it. But which teacher do you know that has the time to sit down and think about it? So finding the space and having colleagues who want to really make that space, not a lesson, a space. So for this project, the teaching artists weren't there all the time. So even though it might take place in an event, then it would return to normal. So one of the researchers that I read calls it veneering, so that everybody tries to make this change, but it's all on a surface level. We have to really dig deep into all the pedagogical challenges to be able to meet that big challenge of making a translanguaging space. It is a big challenge.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that. Just as Eliza said, talking about the quality literature, one of the things that I think has become even more important is making sure that that quality literature is used in the classroom. Certainly the new or the revised English syllabus in the early years doesn't have as much of a priority on using quality literature. And it's one of the strands that we emphasised in the workshops that we did with the teachers before the teaching artists started to work with them in their classrooms. It was interesting because 2 examples that Eliza gave earlier, the Azaria text and the Duck and the Darkling. The Azaria text was something that the teachers in the, I think it was a 5/6 composite or 2 5/6 composites, they were looking at that particular text. And so the teaching artists worked with that text to play in the spaces and places in that text. And then they went on to work with the Duck and the Darklings, which is, I think, a picture book that is just so rich in terms of the kinds of language that Glenda Millard uses. And she makes up lots of words and giving learners the opportunity to see that it is fun to actually play with language and embody that language and think about how they would represent some of those words themselves. So that the actual choice of quality literature as well is important alongside the translanguaging and the reader's theatre and the other kinds of drama strategies. But I should stop there so that we can perhaps, in the first instance, have a look at some of these amazing maps.
I sort of chose to connect the French language, which is one of the languages that I've studied and is part of my repertoire, with dance, because I see dance as a language as well, and French also happens to be the language that's used in dance around the world too. So
yes.
It also connects me to members of my family that also dance, and other members of my family, it's more connecting around literature and books, and that's in English. But yeah, those were the sorts of areas I saw language happening.
Yeah.
It's a great map. If you haven't looked in chat, Raf put it in chat to share with all of us. I loved it.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you recognise dance as a language.
Yes.
As is Auslan. as are all the creoles and many dialects spoken in European, Asian, and Australia in different countries, you know?
What about Anna?
Mine's so much less exciting than the ones that came after. I mean, people started doing full color and drawing, and that was wonderful. Mine was, I forgot to mention that I speak English, but I was just trying to indicate that I have a tiny bit of French and a mouse-sized bit of Russian. And then I was hoping to find a Shakespeare emoji, but the best I could do was a scroll, because I can speak Shakespearean.
Yeah.
There you go. And Julie Choi's got one too.
Yeah, Julie? So let's open it up now and see if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment.
I was just wondering, with the primary students you were working with, what the teachers were hoping to accomplish through using drama, and whether they saw gains in terms of those particular literacy goals.
The primary teachers observed, anecdotally, there's no kind of quantitative evidence around this, but they did observe, I would say, larger gains than the high school students. And they were particularly around oral expression, oracy, more kind of traditional English curriculum outcomes. And then engagement was another big one. One of the schools that we worked with that was a primary school has continued doing the work on her own as well. So she's really sort of taken it, the classroom teacher has really taken it in her stride. And I'm going to misquote it, but they have a very, very high diversity. I was going to say, give you a percent, but I don't want to get it wrong, but it's a very high multilingual classroom as well. And she speaks multiple languages and does a lot of translanguaging within the classroom as well. And so I think having that modeled through the teacher was quite effective as well for the students. Yeah.
Yes.
How do you help EALD students in years 11 and 12, and what text do you recommend for the HSC? I think that's one of the questions when you're not bilingual yourself as a teacher. That's a really big issue, and why it's so wonderful that we can bring other languages into the classroom with a judicious choice of texts. And one that leaps out at me is Ali Cobby Eckerman.
Yes.
So she's been used in the HSC, and she's an Aboriginal woman and an award-winning poet. So that's a great place to start with someone whose language and culture is not Anglo, Scottish, Irish, English. It opens a door to whatever your linguistic and cultural heritage is.
I was just curious, when you're talking about potentially using poetry within this context, is whether you're looking at quality poetry or poetry that is meaningful to the students, or potentially poetry or lyrics that they have, poetry they've written themselves or lyrics from songs, that style of thing. And does that make any sense?
It makes total sense, but I don't think that they're either ors. So, you know, Robyn will laugh. One of my favourite poets is Omar Musa. And he's a very talented poet, rapper. He's written a book. He's had his picture painted for the Archibald. He's illustrated his poetry books, but he's lyrical, beautiful poetry. So it doesn't have to be, is it down with the kids or quality? You can have both. And I think if we look for picture books for a start, especially for EALD students with a low level of English, that's a great start. But Samuel Wagon Watson is an Aboriginal poet, and he wrote a poem about superstition that reflected Aboriginal culture. But which culture doesn't have superstition in it? So once you get that idea out there, a theme, you can bring that voice and that perspective in and open the door to many others. And I think now it's changed in the last 20 years, absolutely. We've got many more books, poetry, picture books, novels even, with more than one language in them. Even
lovely.
Alison Lister, I love this. Isabella's Bed. It's all in English, but at the front it says, Sin amor no hay nada. Poor translation, without love I have nothing. But it's in Spanish. You know, I mean, that's just a tiny little thing. So monolinguals, we can do it. I just think we need to make friends with the librarian in the bookshop and look for what's coming out of Australia. And there's poets coming out of universities and the streets. You know, Ali Cobby Eckermann won a $400,000 prize in America for her poetry, but I'd hardly say she had an academic background in Australia. Would you, Robyn?
No, she didn't. But she's certainly doing very well now, for sure.
Yeah, and we've got many beautiful authors from a range of backgrounds now. And yes, you're right. The lyrics in songs.
Yeah.
That's poetry. You know, everyone's heard of Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Victoria, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Please.
Well, the reason I'm here is because I'm struggling with writing a chapter at the moment about the role of language in the work of publishing children as authors, children's own publishing. And I was rather excited to see that there are two researchers here who have, long after I left my erstwhile organisation, Kids Own Publishing, have done some research exactly on translanguaging and have introduced me to the term translanguaging, which I am now incorporating into my writing. And I just thought it might be an opportunity to hear them say a few words about that experience, since I wasn't there, but I'm very interested.
That would be great.
Sure. Hi, Victoria. Thanks very much for your question. Yeah, we've been really lucky to work with Kids Own and participate in some of their workshops with groups of children. In particular, we did one with a Year 4 class down at the Richmond Youth Hub last year. And it was a sort of 6-week series of workshops that was building towards, for those who don't know, Kids Own works with groups of kids and often their families as well to help them publish a professional picture book as the result of their work. And it's they develop all the illustrations and the storyline and everything collaboratively together. But the first thing that they do as part of their model is to create 8-page books where the children write their own stories to start with. And we found that was a really valuable part of creating the translanguaging space, getting students to share their multilingual resources through those initial books. And that kind of gave us a bit of a jumping off point for Robyn, as you were talking about using some children's literature as a story about valuing difference. And we used Little Light, the story about the mayor who wants to keep everybody out who's different in the town, and gradually the bricks are stolen away until all the different communities come in. So we had ended up having a celebration of difference. So we had dressing up and dancing. We had mums and aunties of some of the kids coming in to teach South Sudanese dancing. And we had costumes and creating foods. And then we also had sharing of stories. And that's where we talked about translanguaging and gave the kids the opportunity to bring in some of their language. And then we saw that came into their final book too. So yeah, it's been so great to hear all about the translanguaging space today, because we're so interested in that and how you create it and what strategies you can use to keep it going in the classroom.
Yeah. Thank you.
Lovely.
Jacqueline is making an English and Sinhala photo book to gift to her grandchildren at Christmas, which is a beautiful thing to do, I think.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, comments? Kathy, did you want to add anything about the translanguaging space, building on what we've just heard about KidZone?
I'm itching to hold up Shorty Creek. Okay. I'm going to do that.
Okay.
But I can't find it. But there's one.
Mm-hmm.
Anita Heiss, Biddy Gulling. I think that's what we should be doing. It's just looking for picture books that have anything, another word, another language, but another perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful. The Shorty Creek one, the reason I like that is it's written in English and in Creole, and the children wrote it, and then they sang it, and it's on YouTube. Like tick, 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 tick. So the full creativity, it's about their place. Shorty Creek is their little creek. So everything there that you'd want. They're using their own language. They're also part of the translation, I would be thinking, to put it in standard Australian English. They illustrated the book, then they sang the song. So when that question was asked about what do you choose, I call that quality literature.
Yeah.
It's produced by the children, it's authentic, and they're using language for a specific purpose and audience. That's everything we're supposed to be teaching. Look, someone's holding up something beautiful.
Victoria?
What is it?
Well, just an example of another KidZone book in multiple languages. Just I haven't got the figures in front of me, but something like, I think it's 30-something% of the over 200 books published are in more than one language. And it's just, I mean, for me, it's always been, and I'm privileged because I'm not a classroom teacher, but it's always been such a powerful way of galvanizing a group and shifting where the center of power resides. So I hate the fact that I'm a monolingual. I was so determined my children would be multilingual. We lived in Ireland for 7 years and they both learned Irish for 7 years. And then we moved to Australia, and what good was their Irish? I really championed them learning Mandarin, and my older daughter was really interested in it, and she loved being able to use it when she traveled in China. But anyway, so what am I saying here? So as a monolingual, when I'm working with a group, if you can switch the emphasis onto other languages, it's just amazing what a powerful galvanizing effect it has on the group in terms of the energy. And you've made points about engagement. And so I just love it. It's one of the first things I do is that we start making art or whatever. And then it's like, who knows the word for this? Who knows the word for that? There's a book we did many years ago in Ireland called Can't Lose Cant. And it was done precisely through just throwing out words in Cant, which is the indigenous language of Ireland. It's the language of traveller people in Ireland. And then, okay, somebody, here's a cat, so who can draw a cat? And then it's, can we say that in Irish? Can we say that in English? Can we say it in Cant? And it's just that game of playing around with language. But one of my favourite examples, and I can't see it here, was with a group of grandmothers of very young children in the Northern Territory who were on an old mission community who had brought together a whole range of Aboriginal languages, and the translanguaging they were doing was just, it was just so fantastic. And just being able, it's the point you've made about being playful. It's just such a powerful way of working. I love it, but I didn't have the word for it until I read Julie and Raf's article about translanguaging with KidZone. I didn't know that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
So I've been rather delighted to stumble upon this concept quite late in the day for me, and to realize I've been doing it well over 20 years, probably more. Just, it's part of arts practice. Geordie Creek.
There
Yes.
it is. Indigenous Literacy Foundation. It's really worth a listen.
I did. I will go and check that out. I check out every now and then what they're up to, because Kids Home published the first 4 books by children for the Indigenous Literacy Foundation, which kicked off their community program. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a fantastic, successful example of really valuing children's creative outputs and raising the status of that. As you say, I mean, I write in my PhD writing very much that literatures by children are absolutely required to be up there and seen as a genre, and the possibilities. I mean, obviously we're looking at one aspect of the possibilities of it in this languaging space, but there are many other possibilities of raising the status of that work and presenting it as an authentic literature. I think it opens up an awful lot of possibilities of in classrooms where you have disengaged kids. Particularly.
This is a poem I came across. Lachlan Brown is an academic, an Australian, was at Charles Sturt. It's called Filling Out a Form. What will you write in the space? Last time you left it blank or just put Australian. That's the way things get glossed in multicultures like ours, right? Classed as mashed potato, fried rice, vigor, half-caste, you won't symbolise the best of what the country's categories allow, not that you care. And yet here, when asked to fill in ethnicity, you find yourself hesitating as though stranded atop the medium strip of John Street, Cabra, passed by streams of traffic. At home, cunning chicken thighs are marinating in rice wine vinegar, dark soy, ginger, garlic and star anise. NB, not all futures are this aromatic. And to me, that sums it up. Yeah, it's written in English, but there is Cabramatta. We know in Sydney what that means. That's an academic writing in English. He understands that. And I think when we're talking about students in HSC years 11 and 12, this is what we should be presenting them with. And there are many poems now in languages other than English written by Australians. And I think that's key to that question about quality literature and what translanguaging means. It just means respecting people's linguistic heritage. You know, I think he summed it up.
Yes, so important. I guess we should say that the pilot with the 4 schools that we talked about initially was very much, as we said, a pilot, and we're hoping that we'll be able to continue this project with more teachers in more contexts over time. And Eliza, would you like to add anything summing up?
Thanks for coming. It's been so, this is not, I'm so interested in this space, and I love working for Create because I get to extend myself, but this is not really my area of expertise. So it's been so wonderful to hear this Q&A, this discussion. I feel really grateful to have been a part of it. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, and the Anna will edit and it will, the YouTube version will be up soon, so it can be shared with others as well. I think this is a really important area that you know we obviously need to take further and give teachers the confidence about the translanguaging space, because it's so important. Kathy, do you want to add anything as we conclude?
I still think every teacher should get a medal. They're all punching above their weight. And this is just another thing. But sometimes it's very comforting when people feel that their own linguistic resources, that it's all right for them to use them in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't have to be, I speak your language. That isn't what it is. It's just saying, I can speak another language. Can you? Oh, let's have a go.
Yeah.
And use what we've got. It can be joyful, like many of the quotes that you read out earlier. Eliza. I think that's what you get when students feel included. And that means if you like my language, like the poem I read you, then you know who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and please think about joining Create, and hopefully we'll see you at another webinar soon. Good night.
Good night.